Welcome to Nocturnal Tales. Tonight we cross the Atlantic to New York in the roaring 20s, where the motor cars roar on Fifth Avenue, the elevated train clatters beyond the buildings, and the city rises each morning like an orchestra tuning itself with unnecessary violence. The violet heiress begins with a headline, "Millionaire's Daughter Taken," and with a celebrated Belgian detective and his faithful companion drawn from their hotel breakfast into a limestone mansion on East 72nd Street, where a shipping magnate's only daughter has vanished behind a printed manifesto, a broken window, and the righteous fury of something calling itself the Liberty Committee. As always, this tale is inspired by the spirit of the great Golden Age crime writers, but the plot, characters, and text you're about to hear are entirely our own creation. This episode is brought to you by the listeners who support Nocturnal Tales on Patreon, and by those who help with one-off tips on Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. If you'd like to support our work, you'll find all the links in the description. And a quick note, our ebook, Nocturnal Tales, The Collected Mysteries, Volume 2, is available now for $3.99. 8 of our earlier mysteries, rewritten and expanded for the page, with original Art Deco illustrations throughout. You can find it on Patreon, Gumroad, and Buy Me a Coffee, links in the description. Now settle in as the crowd gathers behind the police cordon, the telephone rings in the Vandermeer Hall, and a white lady's glove stained with ink raises the first quiet question. Why would a woman writing letters have been wearing gloves at all? Chapter 1. The Girl in the Newsreel. It has always seemed to me that America in the 20s possessed a peculiar genius for making a drama of everything. In England, a scandal may be hidden behind curtains, discussed in lowered voices, and carried discreetly from drawing room to club. In America, it appeared first in great black letters upon the morning paper, then upon a theatre screen before the principal feature, and finally in the mouths of every bootblack chorus girl, bellhop, banker, and professional reformer within 300 miles. We had been in New York for just under a fortnight when the affair began. Poirot had come at the invitation of a gentleman from Philadelphia whose wife believed her emerald necklace to be cursed. As the necklace was afterwards discovered in the possession of the lady's own Pekingese, who had formed the habit of carrying glittering objects beneath the sofa, the matter was not one to tax the little grey cells. Poirot, however, had declared himself delighted with America. "It is so large, Hastings," he said, "so very large. Even the mistakes they are made upon a magnificent scale." We were breakfasting in our hotel overlooking Fifth Avenue. Outside, the motor cars roared, the elevated train clattered somewhere beyond the buildings, and the city seemed to rise each morning like an orchestra tuning itself with unnecessary violence. Poirot sat opposite me, neat as ever, his egg precisely opened, his toast trimmed into geometrical dignity, his moustaches arranged with the care of a monarch reviewing cavalry. I, for my part, was attempting to read the newspaper while resisting an American breakfast of heroic proportions. "Poirot," I said, "there has been a kidnapping." "Mon Dieu, Hastings, in this city there have probably been 3 before the coffee was poured. This one is different." "Ah?" He looked up. I turned the paper so that he might see the headline. "Millionaire's Daughter Taken from Fifth Avenue Home. Miss Evelyn Vandermeer abducted by armed radicals. Family silent. Police promise swift action." Beneath the headline was a photograph of a young woman in evening dress, fair-haired, delicate, and rather serious about the eyes. She had the look, I thought, of one who had been brought up among expensive furniture and stricter expectations. Poirot regarded the photograph for some moments. "She is pretty," I said. "That is not always an advantage, my friend." "No, I suppose not." It makes the world invent stories about you before you have had time to live your own." I read aloud from the report. Miss Evelyn Vandermeer, aged 21, only daughter of Mr. Cornelius Vandermeer, shipping magnate and owner of the Atlantic Union Line, had been seized the previous evening from her family's residence on East 72nd Street. 3 masked intruders had entered shortly after 9 o'clock, overpowering a footman and terrifying the household staff. Mr. Vandermeer was at his club. Mrs. Vandermeer had been upstairs with a headache. Miss Vandermeer was said to have been in the library writing letters. The kidnappers had left behind a printed notice signed by a group calling itself the Liberty Committee. It denounced the kings of commerce, the bought police, and the daughters of wealth who dance while workers starve. It demanded the release of certain imprisoned labor organizers and the distribution of a vast sum in food parcels to the poor of New York. I lowered the paper. "It sounds political." Poirot took a crumb from the tablecloth and placed it carefully on the edge of his plate. "It sounds," he said, "as if someone wishes very much that it should sound political." I knew that tone. "You already suspect something?" "I suspect always. It saves time." Before I could reply, there came a disturbance near the entrance of the dining room. The maître d'hôtel, usually a man of marble composure, was being addressed by a stout gentleman in a dark overcoat who seemed determined to ignore all ordinary laws of hotel etiquette. Behind him stood a younger man with a narrow, impatient face and the air of someone who had slept badly in expensive clothes. The stout gentleman glanced around the room, caught sight of Poirot, and bore down upon us. "Monsieur Poirot." Poirot rose. "I am Hercule Poirot. My name is Abel Roscoe. I represent Mr. Cornelius Vandermeer." The younger man stepped forward. "And I am Julian Fane," he said, "Miss Vandermeer's fiancé." It was an unfortunate introduction. The word fiancé was spoken not with tenderness, but with proprietorship. I disliked him at once, though I admit that my instincts in such matters are not always infallible. Poirot inclined his head. "You wish to consult me?" Roscoe lowered his voice. "Mr. Vandermeer does, immediately. The police are involved naturally, but Mr. Vandermeer has heard of your methods." "He has heard well, I hope." "He has heard that you notice what others miss." Poirot smiled faintly. "It is a useful habit." Fane leaned across the table. "There is no time for cleverness. Evelyn is in the hands of lunatics." Poirot looked at him. "Monsieur, when a young lady is in danger, cleverness is often the only weapon which does not make a noise." Fane flushed. Roscoe intervened hastily. "Mr. Vandermeer's car is outside. He asks that you come at once." Poirot looked at me. "You have finished your breakfast, Hastings?" I looked at the remains of my ham, eggs, pancakes, potatoes, and something described as hominy. "More or less." "Then we go." The Vandermeer house stood upon a street where even the silence seemed privately owned. It was a great limestone mansion with iron railings, polished steps, and curtains that concealed rather than adorned. A crowd had gathered beyond the police cordon. Reporters, photographers, curious women in cloche hats, delivery boys, idlers, and 2 men selling hot chestnuts, as though tragedy had merely improved the weather. Inside, the atmosphere was one of suppressed panic. Police officers moved about with heavy-footed importance. Servants whispered in corners. Somewhere upstairs a woman was sobbing in the thin, exhausted manner of one who has repeated the performance too often. Cornelius Vandermeer received us in the library. He was a tall, grey, formidable man, with a face like a carved eagle, and hands that seemed designed for signing checks, large enough to alter the destinies of nations. He did not waste words. "Monsieur Poirot, my daughter has been taken. I want her found." "That is understood. I do not care what it costs." That also I had understood. A flicker passed across Vandermeer's face. He was not accustomed, I think, to hearing his millions dismissed as the least interesting part of a problem. On the desk lay the printed notice. Poirot did not touch it at first. He walked instead around the room, observing the fallen chair, the torn curtain near the French windows, the ink spilled across a sheet of notepaper, and a small dark stain upon the carpet. "Blood?" I asked. "No," said Poirot. "Ink." He bent closer to the desk. The library was handsome in a sombre fashion. Dark wood, leather chairs, a marble fireplace, shelves of unread books, and above the mantel a portrait of a severe woman in pearls who looked as though she had disapproved of comfort on principle. "The kidnappers entered through the garden?" Poirot asked. Vandermeer nodded. "So the police believe. The French window was forced." Poirot examined the lock. "With much violence," he murmured. "Is that significant?" "Violence is often sincere. Sometimes it is theatrical." Fane, who had followed us in, made an impatient sound. "For God's sake, the window is broken and Evelyn is gone. What else matters?" Poirot turned. "Everything, monsieur, especially the things which seem to matter least." He picked up the notice at last, holding it delicately by one corner. It had been produced upon a cheap press, the letters unevenly inked. "Did your daughter have political sympathies?" he asked. Vandermeer stiffened. "My daughter had no connection with radicals. That was not my question." The old man's eyes hardened. "She attended some settlement house lectures. She gave money to poor children at Christmas. Young women take up these sentimental causes. It passes." "And did it pass?" Before Vandermeer could answer, a quiet voice spoke from the doorway. "No." We turned. A young man stood there, hat in hand. He was perhaps 26, dark-haired, simply dressed, and quite unlike the polished Julian Fane. There was fatigue in his face, but something steadier too. Vandermeer's expression became thunderous. "You have no business here, Mr. Cole." The young man looked at Poirot, not at Vandermeer. "My name is Daniel Cole. I write for the Herald. Miss Vandermeer believed in more than Christmas charity." Fane stepped forward. "Get out." Cole ignored him. "She was frightened last week. She sent me a note asking to meet. She said someone was using her name." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Using her name how?" Cole hesitated. "I don't know. She never came to the meeting." Vandermeer struck the desk with his fist. "This man has been trying to drag my daughter into cheap politics for months." Cole's face darkened. "Your daughter had a conscience, sir." Fane seized him by the arm. "I said get out." Cole shook him off. For a moment the two men stood facing one another, and I had the distinct impression that their dislike was older than the kidnapping. Poirot's voice cut cleanly between them. "Messieurs, we search for a young woman. Your quarrels, however cherished, must wait their turn." There was a silence. Then from the hall came the sharp ring of the telephone. Everyone froze. A servant appeared, white-faced. "Mr. Vandermeer, sir." "It is for you." We followed him into the hall. Vandermeer took the receiver. "Yes?" His face changed. No man of his stamp likes to show fear. It is almost painful to see when it comes. His jaw tightened. The skin around his eyes seemed suddenly old. A thin, mechanical voice emerged faintly from the receiver, altered perhaps by distance, perhaps by some device. "Cornelius Vandermeer will publish the statement. He will feed 10,000 families. He will demand the release of the prisoners named. If he calls in private detectives, his daughter dies." Vandermeer's eyes moved to Poirot. The voice continued. "The girl has awakened. She understands now who her enemies are." There was a click. The line went dead. No one spoke. Then Julian Fane said hoarsely, "They've brainwashed her." Daniel Cole said very quietly, "Or she was never as obedient as you thought." Vandermeer turned on them both with such fury that even I stepped back. Poirot alone remained still. He was looking not at the telephone, nor at Vandermeer, nor at either of the younger men. He was looking at the small silver table beside the instrument. Upon it lay a lady's glove. White kid, very fine, faintly stained at the fingertips with ink. Poirot picked it up. "Mr. Vandermeer," he said, "who found this?" The old man stared. "I don't know. One of the servants, I suppose." Poirot examined the glove, then the notice still in his hand. "Your daughter was writing letters when she was taken." "Yes." "With gloves on?" Vandermeer blinked. Fane frowned. Cole looked suddenly alert. Poirot turned the glove over. On the inside, near the wrist, were 3 tiny initials worked in pale blue silk. E.M.V. "Her glove," said Fane. "What of it?" Poirot did not answer at once. He crossed back into the library and stood before the desk where the ink had spilled. Then he looked at the paper, the glove, the broken window, and the notice of the Liberty Committee. At last he sighed. "Ah, Hastings," he murmured, "already this affair begins to arrange itself badly." "Badly for whom?" "For the person who arranged it." Chapter 2. The Liberty Committee. Poirot has often accused me of possessing a romantic imagination. I deny the charge, though I admit that in the Vandermeer affair there were several moments when romance, politics, crime, and sheer American extravagance appeared to have entered the same motor car and driven at full speed through the front door. The telephone call had left the house in an extraordinary state. Mrs. Vandermeer, who had not yet appeared, sent down a message that she was too unwell to receive anyone. Cornelius Vandermeer shut himself in his study with Mr. Abel Roscoe and 2 senior police officers. Julian Fane strode about the hall like a man seeking an enemy large enough to strike. Daniel Cole, after being threatened with forcible removal twice, remained near the entrance with the obstinacy of the professional journalist. Poirot, however, seemed chiefly interested in the glove. He carried it back to the library and placed it on the desk beside the printed notice. Then he arranged himself before both objects as though they were rival witnesses. "You perceive, Hastings?" "I perceive that Miss Vandermeer was interrupted while writing." "Bon, and that she may have struggled with the kidnappers." "Possibly. You do not think so?" Poirot gave me the look he reserves for my more gallant but less useful suggestions. "My friend, the glove is stained with ink upon the fingertips. Not on the palm, not upon the back, not smeared in confusion. The fingertips." "She dipped her fingers in the ink?" "No, she touched something already wet." "The spilled ink?" "Perhaps." He lifted the notice carefully. "This notice also has upon it a little smear of ink here, at the lower margin. Not printer's ink, Hastings, writing ink, the same blue-black." I bent closer. He was right. At the edge of the paper, hardly visible against the cheap grey stock, was a faint smudge. "You think Miss Vandermeer handled the notice?" "I think someone with ink upon a gloved hand touched it." "That could be one of the kidnappers." "Could it? Then why wear Miss Vandermeer's glove?" This, I confess, silenced me. Poirot smiled. "Do not look so wounded. It is a small point, but small points are the rivets of the case. Remove them, and the great iron bridge collapses." At that moment the door opened, and Inspector McSorley entered. He was a broad Irish-American officer with red hair, a battered hat, and the expression of a man who expected nonsense from civilians, and usually received it. He gave Poirot a look not entirely friendly. "You're the French detective?" "Belgian." Same difference to most of New York. Then New York must improve its geography. McSorley's mouth twitched, despite himself. Mr. Vandermeer says you're to have the run of the place, against my advice. It is fortunate then, Inspector, that advice is so often disregarded by the rich. McSorley grunted. We've got 3 servants who heard the break-in, a footman with a lump on his head, 1 broken window, 1 missing heiress, and a bunch of printed lunacy from a gang calling itself the Liberty Committee. That's not a mystery. That's a kidnapping. And yet, Inspector, you have not found the kidnappers. It's been 12 hours. That is why I still hope for you. I thought McSorley might explode, but instead he laughed once, sharply. All right, Mr. Poirot. What's your miracle? Not a miracle. Order. We begin with the footman. The footman, whose name was Briggs, had been put to bed in a servant's room and was enjoying the importance of injury. He was a pale, respectable young man with a bandage around his forehead and an air of having been promoted by violence. His story was clear. At a few minutes after 9, while crossing the back hall, he heard a noise in the library. He entered and saw 3 masked men. One held a revolver. Another was near Miss Vandermeer, who had risen from the desk. Briggs shouted. The 3rd man struck him from behind. He remembered nothing more until he woke with police and household all around him. From behind? Poirot asked. Yes, sir. Then there were 4 men. Briggs blinked. No, sir. 3, I think. But if 3 were before you, and 1 struck from behind, that makes 4. The footman became distressed. I suppose 1 moved quick, sir. Very quick, said Poirot. Like the cinema. McSorley folded his arms. He was hit on the head. Don't expect arithmetic. Poirot nodded amiably. Quite. And which of the 3 men held the young lady? The tall one, sir. You saw him clearly? He had a mask. But he was tall. Yes, sir. As tall as Captain Hastings? Briggs glanced at me. No, sir, not so tall. As tall as Monsieur Fane? About that, sir. Ah. When we returned downstairs, Fane was in the hall, speaking in low, angry tones to Roscoe. Poirot paused only long enough to look at him from polished shoe to sleek hair. You admire Mr. Fane? I asked when we had passed. I admire the tailor. The man, not yet. We were next taken through the garden door by Inspector McSorley. The Vandermeer garden was a narrow rectangle of winter-bare shrubs, iron furniture, and black earth hardened by frost. Beyond it ran a service lane. The French window had indeed been forced open, but with such enthusiasm that splinters lay inward across the carpet like stage debris. Poirot stood looking at the marks on the frame. Inspector, did it rain last night? A little after midnight. Before then? No. And the soil? Frozen enough to hold some marks, not others. There were footprints near the window, large, heavy, and confused. McSorley pointed them out with satisfaction. 3 men, maybe 4, came from the lane. Poirot crouched. Boots with nailed soles. Working men's boots, said McSorley, fits the radical gang. Or the idea of one. The inspector looked at him sharply. Poirot pointed with his cane. Here the prints approach the window. Here they turn. Here one print is placed over another very carefully. But tell me, Inspector, where are the small prints of Miss Vandermeer being dragged away? She was carried. By men who left many prints while entering and almost none while leaving? McSorley was silent for a moment. Ground got trampled by police after. Ah, yes, the useful police. They destroy all that is inconvenient for the criminal and explain all that is inconvenient for themselves. McSorley took out a cigar and bit the end off savagely. I'm starting to dislike you, Mr. Poirot. That is because I am useful to you. Before the inspector could answer, a shrill whistle sounded from the street. A newsboy was racing along the pavement outside, calling out the afternoon edition. "Vandermeer girl speaks. Heiress joins radicals. Read all about it." McSorley swore and hurried toward the front of the house. We followed. Within minutes, a paper had been obtained. The headline was worse than the cry. "Evelyn Vandermeer renounces her father kidnapped heiress, declares support for Liberty Committee, letter sent to press." The article printed a statement supposedly written by Evelyn herself. In it, she accused her father of profiting from exploited labor, declared that her abduction had opened her eyes, and announced that she would remain with the Liberty Committee until its demands were met. Julian Fane turned white. "It's a lie." Daniel Cole, who had managed to re-enter with the newspaper crowd, read the statement over his shoulder. "That phrase," he said. Poirot turned to him. "Which phrase?" "Opened her eyes." Evelyn used to mock that expression. She said people who had truly opened their eyes did not announce it every 5 minutes. Fane sneered. "So now you are an expert on how my fiancé writes?" Cole looked at him. "Better than you, perhaps." Fane lunged, and only my intervention prevented what would have been an undignified brawl beneath the Vandermeer chandelier. Poirot took the newspaper from Cole. "You have letters from Miss Vandermeer?" Cole hesitated. "Yes." "Love letters?" asked Fane savagely. Cole's face hardened. "No. Letters about your future father-in-law's factories." Fane struck him then. It was a quick, ugly blow, and it caught Cole at the corner of the mouth. Cole staggered back, then recovered himself. To his credit, he did not return it. Poirot stepped between them. "Monsieur Fane, control is not merely a virtue. It is sometimes an alibi." Fane breathed hard, his hands clenched. "You do not know what I feel." "No," said Poirot, "but I begin to know what you fear." For a moment I thought Fane would strike Poirot. Then he turned and walked away. Cole wiped blood from his lip with a handkerchief. "If you want the letters, I'll bring them." "Bring them," said Poirot, "and bring also your memory. It may be more valuable." When Cole had gone, Poirot stood in the hall listening. "To what?" I asked. "To the house." "I hear nothing." "Exactly. A rich house in panic, Hastings, should make many noises. Doors, weeping, orders, confusion. But this house holds itself too stiffly. Someone here has already rehearsed grief." It was then that Mrs. Vandermeer descended the stairs. She was not at all what I had expected. I had imagined a frail, faded woman overcome by shock. Instead, she was handsome, composed, and dressed in black silk, though it was not yet morning. Her face was pale, certainly, but her eyes were dry. "Mr. Poirot?" He bowed. "Madam, my husband tells me you are assisting. I attempt to do so." "Then find my daughter before those animals destroy her." The words were fierce, but oddly formal. Poirot regarded her with sympathy, and something else besides. "You spoke to Mademoiselle Evelyn yesterday." "At luncheon?" "Was she troubled?" "My daughter was often troubled. She took the sufferings of the world as a personal reproach." "And yesterday?" Mrs. Vandermeer looked toward the closed library door. "She asked me whether duty to one's family was always the same thing as obedience." "What did you answer?" "That a young woman discovers the difference too late." There was a silence after this. Poirot said gently, "You believed she wished to break her engagement?" Mrs. Vandermeer's face changed by the smallest degree. "I did not say that." "No, madame." "I am tired, Mr. Poirot." She turned and went back upstairs, leaving behind a faint scent of violets. I watched her go. A strange woman. "A wounded one," said Poirot. which is sometimes more dangerous. We returned once more to the library. Poirot now asked that the desk be left entirely to him. The police, who had already dusted, peered, handled, and rearranged most of it, withdrew with poor grace. On the blotter lay the interrupted letter. Only a few lines had been written. "Dear Daniel, I have been foolish, but not in the way they think. If anything should happen, remember the name I gave you." There the line ended in a great splash of ink. "Cole," I said. She was writing to him. "Yes." "And the name?" "Precisely. What name?" Poirot gave an exasperated sigh. "If it were upon the page, Hastings, I should not be obliged to wonder." He lifted the blotter and examined it. Then he held it near the lamp. I saw nothing. Poirot saw something. He requested a mirror. A maid brought one. By holding the blotter before it, the reversed impression of the final words became faintly readable, pressed into the paper by the force of Evelyn's pen. "Remember the name I gave you, Mara." "Mara?" I said. "Not Marat," said Poirot softly. "Marrow." "Marrow? Is that a person?" "Perhaps, or a place, or a joke. Names are masks, Hastings, and in America everyone appears to possess at least two." He replaced the blotter and stood very still. "What is it?" "The young lady writes a warning to Daniel Cole. Her glove touches the ransom notice. The window is broken with too much drama. The footprints enter but do not convincingly depart. The fiancé fears scandal more than death. The mother speaks of obedience. The father speaks of cost. And now a letter appears in the newspaper in a voice not quite her own." "You think she was not kidnapped by radicals?" Poirot looked at the printed statement. "I think, my friend, that the Liberty Committee may exist. I think they may even have Miss Vandermeer. But I do not think they began this thing." "Then who did?" Poirot's eyes rested on the ink-stained glove. "Someone who knew that in America a headline can hide a crime better than darkness." Some stories are meant not only to be heard, but to be kept. We're very happy to share that Nocturnal Tales, The Collected Mysteries, Volume 2, is now available as an ebook. This second volume brings together 8 of our earliest mysteries, all substantially rewritten, expanded, and carefully edited for the page. These are not simple transcripts of the audiobook episodes. We've gone back through every story, reworked the structure, tightened the prose, improved the clues, and brought them closer to the standard of our more recent work. The result is a proper collected edition, 906 pages, 8 complete mysteries, and an original Art Deco illustration for every story. With every purchase, you receive both EPUB and PDF formats, so you can read on Kindle, Kobo, Apple Books, tablets, or desktop. Volume 2 is available now for $3.99 through Patreon, Gumroad, and Buy Me a Coffee. And this is only the beginning. We have more than 150 stories in the Nocturnal Tales catalog, and our plan is to keep preserving them in collected ebook editions. So, if you'd like to support our work and build your own Nocturnal Tales library, Volume 2 is ready now. Thank you, as always, for listening, reading, and supporting the stories. Chapter 3. Mr. Marrow's Boarding House. Daniel Cole returned at 4 o'clock with a split lip, a folder of letters, and the obstinate expression of a man who had decided that personal danger was less offensive than being dismissed. Inspector McSorley wished to have him removed again. Cornelius Vandermeer wished never to see him again. Julian Fane wished, I believe, to strike him again. Poirot alone received him with courtesy. "Mr. Cole, you are prompt." I was followed. This announcement had its effect. "By whom?" asked McSorley sharply. "A grey motor car, 2 men. They kept a block behind me from the Herald office to Lexington Avenue. I lost them near 42nd Street. Or you imagined them, said Fane. Cole looked at him. I have spent enough time around strikebreakers and private guards not to imagine being followed. Poirot held out his hand. The letters, if you please. Cole surrendered the folder. There were 6 letters, all written in a fine, forward-slanting hand. Poirot read them standing by the library window, his head a little to one side, while the rest of us waited with varying degrees of impatience. At last, he tapped one page with his forefinger. Here. Mademoiselle Evelyn writes, "You once told me that the city has many locked rooms, and most are not in houses. I think I have found one. If I say the name Marrow, do not laugh at me." "Marrow again," I said. Cole nodded. "That was the name she mentioned when we met 3 days ago." "You met her?" said Fane. "At the public library. Broad daylight. Very immoral, I'm sure." Fane flushed. Poirot raised a hand. "And what did she tell you?" "That she had seen her name on a list. Or rather, initials. EMV. She wouldn't say where. She was frightened because the list had amounts of money beside the names. Large amounts. She thought it had something to do with a charity fund her father had been asked to support." "What charity?" Cole hesitated. "The American Relief League." At this, Abel Roscoe, who had been standing near the fireplace, stirred. "That is nonsense. The League is respectable. Judges, senators, churchmen—" "And shipping men?" asked Poirot. Roscoe's face closed. "Mr. Vandermeer has made a contribution." "How large?" "That is private." "Everything is private," said Poirot, "until murder or kidnapping makes it public." McSorley leaned forward. "You saying this Relief League is mixed up in it?" "I say only that Miss Vandermeer saw something she was not meant to see." Cole took a folded scrap from his pocket. "She gave me this. Said if she could not speak freely, I should find the address." Poirot unfolded it. Written in pencil were 3 words. Marrow, West 28th. No number, no explanation. "Does that mean anything to you, Inspector?" McSorley frowned. "West 28th has boarding houses, cheap hotels, speakeasies if you know which doors to knock on. Half the city could hide there. Then we must ask the half politely." Vandermeer, who had entered in time to hear the last exchange, spoke from the doorway. "You are not going anywhere. The kidnappers said no private detectives." Poirot turned. "Mr. Vandermeer, the kidnappers also requested that you feed 10,000 families. Have you arranged it?" "That is being discussed." "Then while you discuss charity, I shall pursue truth." The old man's mouth tightened. "My daughter's life is at stake." Precisely why I do not propose to spend the afternoon being frightened by anonymous voices. There are men who command by shouting, and men who command by refusing to move. Poirot, when he wished, could be the latter to perfection. Vandermeer stared at him, then turned away. "Roscoe, go with them." "No," said Poirot. Vandermeer stopped. "I beg your pardon?" "I prefer Captain Hastings. Also Inspector McSorley, if he will honor us. Too many rich men in a poor street are like trumpets at a funeral. They attract attention and improve nothing." McSorley gave a short laugh. "For once, I agree with him." And so it was settled. Chapter 4. The Hotel Astor Dance Card. The Hotel Astor, when we reached it, was ablaze with electric light. I have never known a building so determined to be noticed. It stood upon Times Square with the confidence of a battleship in evening dress, its windows glittering, its revolving doors swallowing millionaires, actresses, speculators, clubmen, and ladies wrapped in furs, all of them moving beneath chandeliers as though poverty, danger, and kidnapping belonged to another continent. Yet outside, not 20 streets away, men were sleeping in doorways, and somewhere in that same city Evelyn Vandermeer was hidden. It was this contrast, I think, which gave the affair its particular ugliness. A kidnapping in a lonely country house is one thing. A kidnapping in New York is another. The victim may be concealed within shouting distance of 1,000 people and still be as lost as if buried under the Atlantic. Poirot handed the dance card to Inspector McSorley as we entered. The American Relief League held its gala here last week. McSorley looked at the card. That's what it says. You know of them? Everybody knows of them. Society charity. Big dinners, speeches, photographs, silver-haired bishops saying rich people have souls after all. And do they? Bishops? Rich people. McSorley grunted. Depends who's asking. The hotel manager, a nervous gentleman named Mr. Dilling, received us in a small office behind the reception desk. He had the polished courtesy of a man accustomed to disagreeable requests made by important people. Yes, Inspector, the Relief League dinner was held in our grand ballroom last Thursday. A most distinguished event. The governor sent regrets. Senator Wilbraham spoke. Mr. Vandermeer was present. Miss Vandermeer also. And Mr. Julian Fane? Asked Poirot. Certainly. He was seated at the Vandermeer table. Was there any disturbance? Mr. Dilling hesitated one fraction too long. No disturbance as such. Poirot beamed. Then tell us of the disturbance that was not such. The manager looked pained. There was a slight unpleasantness near the service corridor after the speeches. One of the waiters had admitted a man who was not upon the guest list. What man? A labor agitator, I believe, or a reporter. These types are not always distinguishable. Daniel Cole? I asked. Mr. Dilling brightened. Yes, that was the name. McSorley looked grim. Cole again. He spoke with Miss Vandermeer, said Dilling. Briefly. Mr. Fane objected. Mr. Vandermeer was not pleased. The young lady left the ballroom soon after. With whom? The manager's fingers moved upon his blotter. I could not say. Poirot leaned forward. Mr. Dilling, a young woman has been kidnapped. Your discretion is admirable in questions of unpaid accounts and unsuitable companions. In this matter, it is an enemy. Dilling swallowed. She left with Mrs. Vandermeer. That surprised me. Her mother? Yes. Mrs. Vandermeer appeared greatly upset. I saw them pass through the west doors together. And Mr. Fane? He remained in the ballroom for some time. At least I believe so. You believe? There were many guests. Mr. Silas Cord? Asked McSorley. Dilling's face changed. I do not recall the name. But you recall the man, said Poirot gently. The manager said nothing. Scar on the chin, added McSorley. Private detective. Dresses like a funeral director who lost money at cards. Dilling gave a faint sigh. He was present. As a guest? No. He came as part of the security arrangements. Employed by the hotel? By the League. Poirot's eyes shone with satisfaction, though his face remained composed. Ah, the respectable charity employs the disreputable detective. It is a combination one sees often when respectability wishes to keep its gloves clean. Dilling protested weakly. The League insisted. Many valuable jewels were present. Distinguished guests. And perhaps a list, said Poirot. A list? A list upon which Miss Vandermeer saw her initials. The manager's composure cracked. I know nothing of any list. That is not the same as saying there was none. Dilling rose. Inspector, I have helped all I can. McSorley looked at him with professional dislike. You'll help more if I start asking in the lobby. The manager sat down again. "There was a private supper room," he said quietly. "The League committee used it before the dinner. Certain documents were left there. Miss Vandermeer entered the room by mistake, so I was told." "Who told you?" "Mr. Cord." "And afterwards?" "Mr. Fane came looking for her. Then Mrs. Vandermeer. There were words." "What words?" "I did not hear them clearly." Poirot studied him. "But you remember one." Dilling looked away. Mrs. Vandermeer said, "Evelyn, you do not know what men can do when money is threatened." There are phrases which chill not because they are violent, but because they are too informed. This was one of them. Poirot rose. "The private supper room, if you please." Mr. Dilling led us through a corridor lined with palms in brass pots and into the great ballroom. It was empty now, save for 2 workmen removing decorations from a balcony. Without music, laughter, and gowns, the room looked immense and faintly foolish, like a stage after the actors have gone home. The supper room opened from a side passage. It was smaller, windowless, and handsomely furnished. A long mahogany table stood in the center. Against one wall was a sideboard. Near the door, a tall gilt mirror reflected us with theatrical solemnity. Poirot walked once around the room. "Here," he said, "one could speak privately." "And be overheard privately," said McSorley. "Hotel walls are thin when money's involved." Poirot glanced at the mirror. "Not only walls." He stepped closer to it. The mirror was large, ornate, and slightly angled. Poirot tilted his head, then moved to the door, then to the sideboard. "What do you see, Hastings?" "My own face, looking rather tired. Always the military observation." "Thank you. It was not praise." He pointed. From the angle near the sideboard, the mirror reflected not merely the room, but a slice of the corridor beyond the half-open door. A person standing there during the dinner might have seen who entered and who handled papers on the table. "Miss Vandermeer entered by mistake," Poirot murmured. "She sees a list. She sees perhaps her initials. She is discovered. There are words. Later she writes to Daniel Cole." McSorley opened the sideboard drawers with the efficiency of a man who preferred action to deduction. They contained napkins, menus, 2 tarnished spoons, and a cracked ashtray. Poirot pounced upon the ashtray. "Inspector," McSorley looked over. "Ash? But of a cigar." "So?" "Mr. Vandermeer smokes cigars. So does half Manhattan." "Not this kind." Poirot lifted a fragment delicately. "A small black cigar. Italian, unless I am mistaken. Strong, unpleasant. The kind favored by men who wish to appear continental and succeed only in making curtains smell." I remembered something. "Silas Cord?" McSorley nodded slowly. "He smokes those foul little things." Poirot examined the ashtray again. "There is also lipstick upon the rim." "A woman was here," I said. "In a supper room after a gala. Shocking, Hastings." "I meant—" "Yes, yes. But observe. The lipstick is dark, almost plum. Does that recall Miss Evelyn's photograph?" "No. She wore very little paint." "Exactly." Mr. Dilling, who had followed us nervously, said, "Many ladies attended the dinner." "Indeed," said Poirot, "and one of them smoked no cigar but used this glass." "What glass?" Poirot reached behind a folded napkin on the sideboard and produced a small champagne glass with a dried stain at its bottom. "Housekeeping was careless," Dilling murmured. "On the contrary," said Poirot, "housekeeping was human. It is why civilization survives." At that moment a young waiter appeared in the doorway, carrying a crate of empty bottles. He saw McSorley stopped and looked as if he wished to become part of the wallpaper. "You," said McSorley. "Come here." The waiter obeyed reluctantly. "Name?" "Tom Rafferty, sir." "You worked the League dinner?" "Yes, sir." "Private supper room?" "For a time." Poirot smiled at him. "You saw Miss Vandermeer?" Rafferty glanced at Dilling. "Answer?" said McSorley. "Yes, sir. She came in before dinner ended. She looked upset." "Alone?" "At first." "And then?" "A lady came after her. Older. Her mother, I think." "Then a gentleman." "Mr. Fane?" I asked. "No, sir. Not him. A man with a scar." "Cord," said McSorley. Rafferty nodded. "He told me to clear out." "But you did not go far," said Poirot. The young man looked alarmed. "I had bottles to count." "Of course." "And while you counted with your ear against the door, what did you hear?" Rafferty's mouth opened and shut. McSorley took one step toward him. "All right," said the waiter quickly. "I heard the young lady say, 'I will not sign it.' Then the man said, 'Your name is already worth more than your signature.' Then the older lady said something about not here, not before people." Poirot's face became very still. "Not before people," he repeated. "Yes, sir." "What else?" "Nothing clear, except the scarred man laughed." "And Mr. Fane?" "He came later. He was angry. He said to the scarred man, 'You promised there would be no scandal until after the wedding.'" I could not prevent an exclamation. McSorley's eyes narrowed. "Now we're getting somewhere." Poirot raised a finger. "No, Inspector. We are getting to a place. It remains to be seen whether it is somewhere or merely where someone wishes us to stand." Dilling looked wretched. "This is very damaging to the hotel." "A young woman has been abducted," said McSorley. "The hotel will survive embarrassment." "That," said Poirot, "is not always true of people." The waiter Rafferty, now thoroughly frightened, added one more thing. "There was a lady in purple." Poirot turned. "Ah?" "She came out of this room after everyone else. Veil down. Purple dress, black fur. I remember because she dropped a cigarette case. Silver, with a blue stone." "Did you see her face?" "No, sir." "Did you give the cigarette case back?" "No. The scarred man picked it up first." Poirot exchanged a glance with McSorley. "Inspector, we must find Monsieur Cord." "That's been true since before lunch." "And the lady in purple. Half the women in that ballroom were dressed like expensive bruises." "Then we begin with the cigarette case." Mr. Dilling, under pressure, produced the seating plan and guest list of the American Relief League Gala. It was a formidable document, full of names that even I recognized. Senators, judges, bankers, opera singers, widows of industrialists, and reformers with fortunes inherited from businesses they now publicly deplored. Poirot asked for the list to be copied. Dilling resisted. McSorley mentioned obstruction. Dilling complied. As we waited, I saw Poirot's eyes moving down the columns. "Here is Mrs. Vandermeer, Mr. Vandermeer, Miss Evelyn, Mr. Julian Fane, Senator Wilbraham, Bishop Clay, Mr. Abel Roscoe. What?" "Mrs. Livia Starr." McSorley frowned. "Widow, rich. Runs with theatre people and charity boards. Why?" "Because," said Poirot, "beside her name, someone has made a small mark in blue pencil." "So?" "The dance card we found was marked also in blue pencil." He tapped another name. "And here, Mrs. Marion Vale." "Who is she?" "According to Mr. Dilling's expression, someone he would rather not discuss." The hotel manager gave a start. "Mrs. Vale is a perfectly respectable patroness of the League." "Then we shall respect her perfectly by asking questions." Dilling returned with the copied list. Poirot folded it and placed it in his pocket beside the dance card. As we left the hotel, the lobby had grown livelier. Evening had descended upon New York. Men in dinner jackets passed women glittering with jewels. A jazz band somewhere beyond the Palm Court began to play a tune too cheerful for the occasion. At the revolving doors, a bellboy hurried toward us. "Monsieur Poirot?" "Yes." "A message, sir. A lady asked me to give it to you." Poirot took the envelope. "What lady?" "Purple dress, sir, black fur, veil down." We all froze. "When?" "Just now, sir. She left by the 44th Street entrance." McSorley was already moving, but Poirot opened the envelope first. Inside was a single sheet of hotel stationery. The writing was elegant, slanted, and hurried. "If you want the Vandermeer girl alive, stop looking at the League and look at the wedding. Ask why Julian Fane cannot afford to marry her, and why he cannot afford not to." There was no signature. McSorley swore and ran toward the side entrance. I followed, but the street outside was a confusion of motor cars, theater crowds, newspaper boys, and electric signs. Of the lady in purple there was no trace. When we returned, Poirot remained by the revolving door, holding the note. "Well?" I asked breathlessly. "Is it true?" "Which part?" "About Fane." Poirot folded the note very carefully. "My dear Hastings, anonymous warnings are like actresses. They may tell the truth, but one must always ask who paid for the performance." "But it points to Fane." "Yes." "And the dance card points to Fane." "Yes." "And Rafferty heard Fane speak with Cord." "Yes." "Then surely," Poirot sighed, "already you wish to arrest the bridegroom. The evidence, Hastings, is beginning to behave like an over-helpful waiter. It brings us exactly what we think we ordered, and far too quickly." That checked me. "You think someone is framing him?" "I think someone is inviting us to believe that Julian Fane is ruined, desperate, and connected to Cord." "And is he?" Poirot looked out through the hotel glass at the blazing heart of Times Square. "Almost certainly." "Then what troubles you?" "That in this affair everyone appears guilty of something, but not necessarily of the same thing." Chapter 5. The Bridegroom's Debt. It is one of the inconveniences of criminal investigation that one is so often obliged to deal with people at the very moment when they are least disposed to be agreeable. This was certainly true of Julian Fane. We found him not at the Vandermeer house, nor at his club, but in a private room above a restaurant on West 47th Street, where the air smelled of tobacco, whiskey, and financial anxiety. The restaurant, Inspector McSorley informed me, sold coffee in front and nearly everything else behind. Fane was seated at a round table with 3 men who looked as if they had been poured into their dinner jackets rather than dressed by valets. A pack of cards lay scattered before them. So did a number of banknotes. When we entered, Fane rose so quickly that his chair fell behind him. "What the devil is this?" McSorley showed his badge. A friendly call. One of the men, a narrow-faced fellow with a diamond pin, gathered the money with slow fingers. Poirot looked at him mildly. "You will leave that where it is." The fellow smiled. "Who says so?" McSorley put a hand inside his coat. The smile faded. The money remained. When the 3 men had gone, Fane turned on us. "You fools! Do you know what you've done?" "Interrupted a card game," I suggested. He looked as though he would have liked to add me to his list of injuries. Poirot sat and began arranging the scattered cards into neat piles. "You owe these gentlemen money." "That is none of your business." "How much?" Fane said nothing. McSorley picked up a slip from the table. $32,000. The sum startled me. In those days it was not merely a debt, it was a catastrophe wearing patent leather shoes. Poirot placed the cards squarely together. And yet you are engaged to Miss Evelyn Vandermeer, heiress to one of the largest shipping fortunes in America. Fane's jaw tightened. That engagement is not a transaction. No. Then why did you say to Mr. Cord at the Hotel Astor that there must be no scandal until after the wedding? Fane stared. For the first time since we had met him, his arrogance faltered. Who told you that? A waiter with a memory. Fane went to the window and stood looking down at the lights of 47th Street. When he turned back, he seemed older. All right. Yes, I owe money, more than I can pay. If I do not settle, I am ruined. With violence? Asked McSorley. With publicity, said Fane bitterly. Violence is almost cleaner. And your marriage to Evelyn would settle the matter, said Poirot. Her father was to settle a portion on her, enough to clear my debts. Did Miss Vandermeer know? Fane did not answer quickly enough. She knew some of it. Did she still wish to marry you? His face flushed. Evelyn was confused. People had been filling her head with nonsense. Daniel Cole? Cole, settlement house women, agitators, parasites who flatter rich girls by telling them guilt is the same as virtue. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And Silas Cord? Was he one of these parasites? Fane sat down heavily. Cord came to me after the League dinner. He said Evelyn had seen something that could damage the League and my prospects. He said he could manage it. Manage what? Scandal, talk, Cole, Evelyn's doubts. Fane passed a hand across his forehead. I thought he meant pressure, a warning, recovering letters, that sort of thing. You paid him? No, I had no money. Then who did? Roscoe. Poirot looked up. Mr. Abel Roscoe? He handles Vandermeer's affairs. He did not want the marriage delayed. No one did. Except the bride, said McSorley. Fane winced. I loved Evelyn. The words were badly spoken, tangled with vanity and resentment, but I could not be entirely sure they were false. Poirot leaned back. Did you kidnap her, Monsieur Fan? No. Did you know she would be kidnapped? No. Did you suspect that Cord might take action against her? Fane's mouth opened, then closed. I thought he might frighten her, he said at last. Make her see sense. Poirot's expression hardened. Ah, to make a woman see sense. How many crimes have hidden themselves in that phrase? Fane looked down. After she was taken, Cord sent me a message. He said that if I kept quiet, Evelyn would be returned before the week was out. Hysterical, perhaps, compromised by scandal, but alive. And you believed him? I wanted to. McSorley made a noise of disgust. You didn't go to the police? My debts would come out. Cord would come out. The wedding would be finished. Vandermeer would destroy me. Better you than the girl, said McSorley. Fane covered his face with his hands. For once, Poirot did not press him. Instead, he rose and crossed to a side table where a silver tray held glasses, matches, and a cigar stub. Inspector. McSorley glanced at it. Cord's black cigar? Oui. He has been here. Fane lowered his hands. Yes, an hour before you came. What did he want? To tell me to leave New York tonight. Why? He said the case was turning, that if I stayed I would be made to carry all of it. All of what? He would not say. Only that there are men in this city who can bury a scandal so deep it comes up respectable. Poirot placed the cigar stub back. Did he say where Evelyn is? No. Did he mention a lady in purple? Fane looked up sharply. No. Who is she? Poirot did not answer. A knock sounded at the door. McSorley opened it. A young police officer stood outside. "Inspector, message from headquarters. They found cord?" McSorley's face changed. "Where?" "East River, Pier 31. "Alive?" The officer shook his head. The room seemed suddenly smaller. Poirot took his hat. "Come, Hastings." Pier 31 was a black, wet place where the river slapped the pilings, and the lights of Brooklyn trembled across the water. Police lamps threw hard circles over the boards. Silas Cord lay beneath a tarpaulin beside a stack of crates. He was a lean man of about 45, slick-haired, with a scar along his chin and a face that death had not made honest. Near his collar was a dark wound. "Shot," said McSorley. "Close range." Poirot bent beside the body. "Not robbed?" "Wallet and watch still here." Poirot examined Cord's right thumb. "Ink," he murmured. McSorley looked sharply. "Like the glove?" "Perhaps." From Cord's inner pocket, the police had recovered 3 items: a railway timetable, a key tied with red string, and a torn piece of blue paper. Poirot unfolded the paper. It bore only fragments. "Girl moved before dawn. Not Fane, Violet knows." "Violet?" I said. "The lady in purple?" asked McSorley. "Perhaps," said Poirot, "but violet is also a colour, a flower, a perfume, a name, and sometimes a trap." A dock watchman had seen a woman leave the pier shortly before the shot was heard. Dark coat, hat low, face unseen. She had got into a cab and vanished. Poirot looked at the river. "Cord has become untidy." "Untidy," said McSorley. "He knew too much, frightened too many, blackmailed too carelessly. Such men are useful until they are not." A police photographer's flash lit the pier like lightning. In that brief glare, Poirot saw something beneath Cord's left hand. He lifted the dead fingers carefully. There lay a small silver cigarette case, slightly crushed. On its lid was set a blue stone. "The waiter's cigarette case," I said. Poirot opened it. Inside were 3 cigarettes, a trace of powder, and a small folded paper tucked behind the lining. It was a list. Most names meant nothing to me. Some were initials only. Beside each appeared a sum. Halfway down the page I saw EMV 25,000. Beneath that, JF, useful until marriage. And lower still, CV, final approval. "Cornelius Vandermeer," I said. Poirot did not answer. He folded the list and placed it in his pocket. "Inspector, this must not reach the newspapers." McSorley stared. "Since when do you protect rich men?" "I protect facts until they are ready to stand upright." We returned to the Vandermeer house in grim silence. There we found chaos. Reporters at the gates, police in the hall, and Abel Roscoe waiting with the controlled alarm of a lawyer whose documents have begun to bleed. "There has been another communication," he said. He led us into the library. Upon the desk lay a phonograph record. "It was delivered by messenger," said Roscoe. "They say it is Evelyn." The record was placed upon the machine. It hissed, crackled, and then a young woman's voice emerged, thin, strained, but distinct. "Father, do not send the police. Do not trust Julian. Do not trust Mr. Roscoe. I am not harmed. I have learned the truth. The Liberty Committee speaks for the forgotten. You must do as they ask." A pause. Then softer. "Mother, if you hear this, remember the Violet Room." The needle scratched on. No one moved. Poirot lifted it. "The Violet Room," he said. Vandermeer turned to Roscoe. "What does that mean?" Roscoe looked blank. "I have no idea." But from the doorway came a sound. Mrs. Vandermeer stood there in a dressing gown, white as paper. "She said that?" Yes, said Poirot gently. Mrs. Vandermeer gripped the doorframe. There is no violet room. Her voice was steady, too steady. Poirot bowed his head. Then, madame, we must discover why your daughter believes there is. Chapter 6. The Violet Room. There are houses which reveal themselves willingly. The Vandermeer mansion was not one of them. It had been built not merely to shelter a family, but to defend one against weather, creditors, gossip, unsuitable marriages, newspapers, and those inconvenient human feelings which disturb great fortunes. Even grief moved there upon carpets thick enough to muffle it. Mrs. Vandermeer stood in the library doorway, pale and still. There is no violet room, she repeated. Poirot regarded her gently. Madame, your daughter says otherwise. My daughter is under duress. She may say anything. Perhaps, but one does not invent such a phrase under duress unless it has meaning. Cornelius Vandermeer turned on his wife. Clara, what is this? She looked at him then, and for the first time I saw neither the elegant wife nor the wounded mother, but a woman who had spent many years deciding which truths could be survived. It was nothing, she said. Poirot's voice sharpened. Nothing is a word that has hidden more crimes than any other. She sank into a chair. When Evelyn was a child, she called my sitting room the Violet Room. The walls were mauve then. I kept violets there in winter. Where is this room? It was redecorated years ago. Show me. Vandermeer protested at once. My daughter is being held by criminals, and you wish to inspect wallpaper? No, monsieur, I wish to inspect memory. We went upstairs. Poirot, Inspector McSorley, Vandermeer, Mrs. Vandermeer, and I. Abel Roscoe attempted to follow, but Poirot stopped him. You will remain here, monsieur. I represent Mr. Vandermeer. At present you represent too many things. Roscoe's face tightened, but he stayed below. Mrs. Vandermeer led us to a pale green sitting room overlooking the rear garden. It was elegant, unused, and faintly cold. If it had ever been violet, no trace remained. Poirot examined the room in silence. At last he stopped before a tall cabinet. This has been moved. Mrs. Vandermeer did not answer. Poirot pointed to the carpet. The fading proves it. It once stood farther left. Vandermeer pulled the cabinet aside with impatient strength. Behind it, set into the wall, was a small, locked panel. Mrs. Vandermeer closed her eyes. The key was on a thin chain beneath her dress. Inside the panel lay 3 bundles of letters, a photograph, and a small ledger bound in violet leather. Poirot opened the ledger. His eyes moved down the pages. He did not read aloud. That, I think, was mercy. At last he said, "The American Relief League was not merely a charity." "No," said Mrs. Vandermeer. "It collected money from the rich for the poor. Some was distributed, enough for photographs and speeches. The rest was diverted." She nodded. "By whom?" Roscoe arranged it. Others approved it. Judges, politicians, bankers. Men who liked charity so long as it paid twice. Once in reputation, once in influence. Vandermeer stared at her. "I did not know." Mrs. Vandermeer gave a small, terrible smile. "You never knew anything that it was convenient not to know." Poirot removed from his pocket the list found in Cord's cigarette case. "The initials C.V. They are not Cornelius Vandermeer." "No," she said. "They are Clara Vandermeer." I started. "You?" "I approve nothing," she said. "I was listed because I had discovered too much. Roscoe meant to force me to endorse the League publicly. A wife's face is useful when men's hands are dirty." "And Evelyn?" I asked. "She saw part of the list at the Hotel Astor. Her own initials were on it. Poirot nodded. EMV 25,000. She was to become the League's young angel, the heiress with a conscience. Her name would raise money, hide theft, and make criminals look humane. Mrs. Vandermeer's voice trembled. She refused. And so, said Poirot, they frightened her. Then the fright became abduction. Vandermeer gripped the mantle. Roscoe? Roscoe, said Poirot, with Silas Cord. Fane knew enough to be afraid and not enough to be innocent. The Liberty Committee was theatre. The broken window, the manifesto, the footprints, all arranged to make a private crime look political. "Where is Evelyn?" demanded Vandermeer. Poirot turned to McSorley. The timetable found upon Cord. It was not for escape. It was for transfer. Cord was to move her before dawn, but he died before he could do so. Therefore someone else still holds her. "The lady in purple," I said. "Mrs. Livia Starr," said Poirot. Patroness of the League, she recruited women, arranged dinners, managed appearances. Her cigarette case was found in Cord's hand. She warned us because Cord's death frightened her, but she did not warn enough because she is guilty too. McSorley leaned over the ledger. "This address?" Poirot tapped the page. "A private women's rest home in Hoboken, owned through one of the League's little companies. A respectable prison for inconvenient women." McSorley was already moving. "No sirens," said Poirot. "No newspapers. If Roscoe learns we go there, Miss Vandermeer may vanish." We left by the rear entrance. Roscoe was in the hall, speaking calmly to a police officer. Poirot paused before him. "Monsieur Roscoe, remain available." Roscoe smiled. "For Mr. Vandermeer, always." "For me," said Poirot, "especially." The rest home stood on a quiet Hoboken street, narrow, brick, lace-curtained, and poisonous with respectability. Its brass plate read, "Mrs. Bellamy's Retreat for Nervous Ladies." McSorley placed men at the back, then he knocked. A matron opened the door, began to protest, and stopped when she saw his badge. Poirot said only, "We have come for Miss Vandermeer." The matron's face did not change quickly enough. From upstairs came a crash. We ran. A man burst from a second-floor room with a pistol. McSorley felled him with one blow. Another surrendered at once. Behind a locked door, a woman called out, "In here." The key was in the fallen man's pocket. I opened the door. Evelyn Vandermeer stood beside the bed, pale and hollow-eyed, but alive. Her hair had been cut shorter, and she wore a plain dark dress that was not her own. There was a bruise upon her wrist, but her eyes were clear. For a moment, she stared at us. Then she said with admirable composure, "Is my mother safe?" "Not my father, not Julian. My mother." Poirot bowed. "She is safe, mademoiselle, and so now are you." Evelyn sat down abruptly, as though courage had been the only thing keeping her upright. Mrs. Livia Starr was found in the adjoining room, dressed for travel, with a packed valise and several $100s in cash. She was handsome, dark-haired, and ruined by fear. She denied everything until McSorley showed her the silver cigarette case. Then she looked at Poirot. Cord was going to betray us. "So you killed him?" asked McSorley. He tried to sell the girl twice. To Roscoe, to Fane, perhaps to the newspapers. He was filth. "And you, madame?" said Poirot. She laughed once. "I was practical." Poirot's face grew cold. That is what criminals say when they have grown too tired to invent a conscience. Roscoe was arrested before midnight while attempting to leave the Vandermeer house with papers hidden beneath his coat. The papers confirmed everything. The Liberty Committee existed only as a convenient mask. The manifesto had been written in Roscoe's office. The phonograph record had been forced from Evelyn, though she had inserted violet room, hoping her mother would understand. Julian Fane was not arrested for the kidnapping. He had been cowardly, selfish, and silent, which ruined him more completely than a prison sentence might have done. Evelyn never saw him again. 2 days later, Evelyn received us in the green sitting room that had once been violet. Mrs. Vandermeer sat beside her. The cabinet no longer hid the wall panel. "You knew I had not joined them willingly?" Evelyn asked. "I knew the newspaper letter was not your voice," said Poirot. "Daniel told you?" "He helped?" A faint colour came into her face. "Mr. Cole is a good man." "Then take care, mademoiselle. Good men are often poor, stubborn, and inconvenient." She smiled. Those may be his best qualities. On the train back to New York, Poirot was unusually quiet. "At first," I said, "it looked political, then financial, then romantic. In the end, it was all three." Poirot nodded. "Crime wears the costume of the age, Hastings. Here it wore charity, publicity, reform, but beneath it was the old skeleton. Greed? Greed, fear, vanity, and the desire to control another human soul and call it duty. And Evelyn? She will do well." "You think so?" "She has suffered, but she has also learned. That is a severe education, but not always a useless one." "And Daniel Cole?" Poirot gave me a sidelong glance. "My dear Hastings, you are incurably romantic." "I merely asked." "Precisely." He settled back, smoothing one immaculate cuff. "Still, if Miss Vandermeer chooses a poor journalist over a rich coward, I shall not call it the worst mistake made in America." Which, from Poirot, was practically a blessing. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of The Violet Heiress. This was a case that wore three costumes: political, financial, romantic, and beneath each one the same old skeleton: greed, fear, vanity, and the desire to control another human soul and call it duty. The Liberty Committee was theatre. The manifesto was written in a lawyer's office. The broken window was staged. And at the center of it all, a young woman with a conscience was turned into a commodity by men who liked charity so long as it paid twice, once in reputation, once in influence. What makes the case linger is a quiet observation on the train home. Crime wears the costume of the age. In 20s New York, it wore charity, publicity, and reform. The most dangerous people were not the masked intruders, but the respectable advisors, the smiling fiancé, and the patroness who called herself practical when she had grown too tired to invent a conscience. Evelyn Vandermeer survived not because she was rescued in time, but because she had hidden two words, "violet room," in a forced recording, trusting that someone who loved her would hear them. If this kind of case stayed with you, the one set in American noise, old money, and the machinery of respectability, tell us in the comments what you suspected first: the fiancé, the lawyer, or the charity itself. And tell us whether you'd like more transatlantic mysteries, or whether we should return to quieter, deadlier English ground. And if you'd like to support Nocturnal Tales and help keep these full-length mysteries coming, you'll find links in the description for Patreon, and for one-off tips via Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. Our ebook, Nocturnal Tales: The Collected Mysteries, Volume 2, is also available for $3.99 on Patreon, Gumroad, and Buy Me a Coffee. For now, thank you again for staying with us to the last line. Until the next case, be wary of charity that pays twice. Watch who controls the young woman with the conscience, and remember, the most dangerous cage is the one built from good causes by bad men.